Welcome to the Gold Standard here on the 440 Sports Network, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody, or just Thanksgiving, everybody. That's Emma Lingan. I am Braden Gall. Emma, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm well. And you? Is it not a happy Thanksgiving over there? Is that why the qualifier?
I think it's happy for me. It's probably very happy for you. I'm not sure Predators fans are all that happy. I'm not sure Predators players are that happy. I'm not sure the coaching staff is happy. I'm not sure the general manager. I'm concerned about his general mental health and well-being. No, I'm kidding. But we have a lot to get to today on the show, as Nate already in the comments with emotion and frustration. So if you want to get involved in the show, please do so. Jump into the comment section. We are going to take a long journey here today on the show. We're going to look at the timeline of the last 2 weeks, and we're going to kind of go piece by piece and look at what it tells us about what's coming for the organization. Whether that's with players, whether that's with the general manager, whether that's with the coaching staff. We're going to analyze what is being said, what we think it means, and who can maybe change some of that messaging strategy. I know you've written about this, Emma, so we'll get to a lot of things today on the show. However, it is the day before Thanksgiving, and if you are, in fact, scrambling, much like the Nashville Predators, to find answers to any questions about tomorrow or Friday or this weekend for your gatherings on Thanksgiving, Sinkers Beverages is the answer to all of them. Might even be the answer to some of the Predators' problems, frankly. Go to Sinkers Beverages. I picked up about 5 or 6 bottles of wine, all fairly affordable for like a large gathering. I'm very excited because I think everyone's going to like it. There's something for like the real wine person, but also something for the non-expert like me. Found a nice bottle of champagne that we can celebrate with on the right occasion. I got a nice allocated bourbon that I'm going to use for the cocktails for some of the people that want that. We've got some cheap champagne, the cava that my wife likes that we in the black bottle. I think it's Fresgenet. I don't even know how to say it. It's from the Europe, and but you mix that with some orange juice, you're good to go on Thursday and Friday morning. So everything I needed this weekend, which I don't need help on the bourbon, I can do that, but they have great selection. Everything I needed this weekend, I needed help with. I picked up like 3 or 4 different types of beer. The whole place is stocked, Emma. If you need, you come on over. You can come. I got something for you. It doesn't matter what you're drinking. You come on over. I got you covered this weekend. Okay.
All right. Well, be careful what you wish for. I might be showing up, especially if the Predators lay another egg of a game. I definitely might need some beverages.
My favorite Thanksgivings are the Packers at noon against the Lions, because then I get to start with the Bloody Marys like right away. I get to, because I don't drink as much as I used to, but I'm tying it on tomorrow, boys and girls. I'm ready to go.
That's what holidays are for. Yeah, that's what holidays are for.
No, we've got 4 nieces and nephews in the house, and so there's 6 kids under 7 or under 8, and a lot of siblings. My wife's siblings are here. It's great. We're having a great time. There's probably like the knocking on the door. If you hear that, that's probably the 1-year-old just knocking at the door, being like, "Come on, I need some help here." As do the Predators. Okay, so I'm going to lay out the timeline first and foremost. Okay, let's lay out the timeline. And as I'm going through this, please feel free to stop me and interject where you think important context is needed. And then afterward, we'll discuss what it means for the entire organization, what it means for some decisions, and then get into sort of like parsing out the language, read between the lines, etc. So this will be like a timeline and a translation, at least to some degree. So I'm going to start with November 6th, because that was the night they lose to Philadelphia. And Ryan O'Reilly, after the game, which is what Ryan does, he takes it on himself every time. But I think it is, in context here of this whole entire timeline, I think it is noticeable that he goes on such a tangent that he then comes back a couple days later and regrets saying and wants to backpedal and all that stuff. But when you have to read with Ryan O'Reilly, when he's saying that stuff, that he can't complete a 6-foot pass, it's also him commenting on the whole team, just in not so many words, right? So that's when it starts. Ryan O'Reilly comments November 6th. November 10th, they lose to the Rangers. They give up 6 goals to a team that has been shut out at home 5 times. They leave that night to go to Sweden. That is when Greg Wyshynski of ESPN sits down and talks to Ryan O'Reilly for one of the stories. And I assume, from what I understand, also spoke to other players for a future story that came out yesterday, but we'll get to that. So that's November 10th. November 11th, you and I discussed this at length last week, so we're not going to get into this, but November 11th is Frank Saravelli's first report of this toxicity thing that he's alluding to. I'm not going to get into the semantics of that, but that was on November 11th, the very next day after the Rangers loss. The Predators are in Sweden that whole week. They then play November 14th. Probably should have lost the game. Finished with the game tire and the game winner with Forsberg and Stamkos. They then lay a giant egg on the 16th, that Sunday morning. They get back to Nashville that night or the next morning, depending on where your brain is at and what time zone your brain is in. And they're back around. Barry Trotz puts off his interview with 102.5 that Tuesday to Thursday. And that Thursday interview on November 20th is when the coaching their butts off quote comes out from Barry Trotz, which is defense of the coaching staff. Hey, they're doing a great job. They're working their butts off. They're coaching their butts off, right? That's November 20th. The very next day, November 21st, that is when Barry Trotz sits down with Alex Doherty of the Tennessean, which will come out a couple days later. The very next day after that, on the 22nd, they lose 3-0 to Colorado. They played relatively well for most of that game, but still being shut out at home is bad. So I get paid for the articulations, Emma. November 24th, during the day, Barry Trotz sits down with Greg Wyshynski, and that's the big article that came out yesterday on Tuesday. In between, they give up 8 goals to Florida and lose at home. And after the game, Andrew Brunette has the 11-second comment, which is, when did you learn? When did you know? What happened? 11 seconds in. But in between all of that, Barry Trotz's quotes to the Tennessean start to because it comes out on Monday, that's when the quotes start to hit. The interview had been conducted prior to the Colorado 3-0 loss. Are you with me so far? Have I gotten this all correct so far?
Yep, you're nailing it.
Okay. Whew, okay. I'm tired. I need a drink already. Okay.
Sinkers Beverages, everybody.
Earmuffs for you kids, but it's just too good not to say out loud. I need more fucking from them. I need more from the players. He is calling the players out, Barry Trotz, in that interview. Now, I will say one small nugget here of media analysis. I think Alex is a fine reporter. I think the job of the reporter at times is to sometimes make sure the sentences make sense. And if I had been writing that, I don't know what you would have done. I know Adam Vingan and I would have talked about this. You switch the word around. If you're writing a story, you do the general manager a solid, which is not, it's not shaping the quote. It's making the quote accurate for the sake of the conversation. And you would probably say, I need bleeping more from them, which is what his point was, which is what you're kind of supposed to write. If, again, a minor criticism here. So that starts to make its rounds. Then the Wyshynski story comes out yesterday, where he says all the things he says about how I'm not committed to Andrew Brunette being the head coach throughout the entire course of the season, but have no interest in making a change because I'm not getting any pressure from the front office or from the ownership group. I'm open. We're not open for business, but the vultures are circling, which is Wyshynski's line in that story. And that we'll find out in about 7 or 8 games, which again, remember those comments were before the Florida match. So I guess we're at about 6-7 games. December 6th at Carolina would be the 7th game since Barry Trotz's comments, and December 9th versus Colorado at home would be the 8th game, just for sake of conversation. They play Detroit on Wednesday. They're at Detroit tonight. They're at Chicago on Friday night. They got Winnipeg and Calgary, the other team they are fighting for the first pick in the draft with, on Tuesday of next week before we come back. All right. Anything I get wrong there? Anything I leave out in your opinion? Is there any other factoids or information that I need to include in this timeline? Because we'll get to what it means stepping back from each detail, and then we'll get into each detail. So how do you feel about that layout there?
I think it's pretty complete. The one thing I might add, and maybe this was woven in there at some point, but at one point during all of that, when Barry Trotz sat down with 102.5 and did the interview with them, that's where he talked about the coaching his butt off thing. And then at one point after that, I think Brunette. I think it was after the after the Florida game, where he said, "I'm coaching my butt off," and then it kind of became like a joking, like kind of a joke that like, oh, is that just the party line now? But yeah, for the most part, yes, that's complete.
Sorry, I missed the last one, which is Frank Saravelli doubling down on his toxicity report yesterday at 1 o'clock, roughly, saying from top to bottom, this is the most toxic organization in the NHL. People have discounted that. You have discounted that. Alex Doherty has discounted that. Barry Trotz in his comments to ESPN has discounted that. Adam Vingan asked Barry Trotz about this yesterday on their interview, and he says, which I actually don't think is as good of an answer as he thinks it is, which is, I went and asked my captain if he's doing okay. Like, I don't think that it doesn't give me comfort that he feels the need to have to go ask the players if there's toxicity in the locker room, because then he already doesn't know the answer when you should already know the answer. I feel
well, I mean, in fairness, he probably does know the answer, but he needed to like confirm so that way he can say when someone presses him, well, how do you know it's not toxic? Well, I talked to the captain. Right. Like, it doesn't. But yes, I agree. He could have maybe phrased that a little bit better. But
look, I'm there every day. I talk to these guys. They're in a great place. They're playing hard for their coach, which he said to Wyshynski. So.
Yeah. And again, I will just point out, he's here every day. I'm here every day. Alex is here every day. You know who's not here every day? Frank Saravelli. So maybe let's just point out that observations are not the same things as reports. And if you want... If certain observations are what you as a fan want to hear, that's fine. But just remember that observing and reporting, two different things.
I do think it's important to note that Saravelli's background is a little bit more New York Daily Post than it is New York Times, just as a point of fact. It doesn't mean he's wrong. It doesn't mean his report is incorrect. But it's important context. He is not here every day. And his background is a little bit more from the sensational side of media than anything else. So I just think that's it. Again, it does not mean that he's incorrect on this, but it is worth pointing out. Here's my broad takeaway from all of this. Like, number one, like, you have Steven Stamkos basically giving quotes to a national reporter that, like, this is a thing we've got to think about now, which is maybe waiving my no movement clause. We haven't had those conversations yet. Barry Trotz is saying we haven't had those conversations yet, but it could be coming soon if things don't change. And Roman Josi, same kind of thing. These players are acknowledging the reality of the situation, which is, I mean, I hope that's on a human level what happens. You don't normally have this much stuff when everything is going great. Like, when there's smoke, there's fire. And I'm not saying that Saravelli's reports are correct, but when you put it all together and you have Ryan O'Reilly clearly frustrated with how he's playing, but also with how the team's playing. When you have Barry Trotz on damage control all the time with local and national outlets, that obviously things are wrong. Obviously people are frustrated. Obviously the things aren't working on the ice. Obviously blowing up your players in public to the press didn't work on Monday night because the story dropped on Monday. They played Florida and it took 11 seconds for them to show exactly what Barry Trotz is talking about. Hey, I need more. Nah, we're good. And I'm not saying they did it on purpose, but like, something is wrong, something is off, and that's master of the obvious stuff. But when this many reports are coming out from this many angles and there's this much smoke, generally there's fire. I just don't know what the fire is, Emma. I don't know what it is.
Well, that's true. Okay, so first off, I think you're right. I think when there's this much coming out, a lot of this really comes back to messaging and the fact that, woof, does Barry Trotz need some media coaching, like, badly, because a lot of this could be cleared up with proper messaging. But he's already kind of, it's like he digs himself a little bit deeper into the hole every time he talks. And it's like, someone needs to coach him. Someone needs to help him. But first off, I want to go back for a second, talking about how, trying to light a fire under his players in the media, which again is something a coach does. It's not something a general manager does.
Usually.
usually, but I think it does a couple things. Number one, it doesn't add proper context. So all he says is, well, it's not the coach's fault, it's the player's fault. Whether or not that's what he actually meant, that's what comes across. What comes across is, well, I built this really great team and you guys are messing it up. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily what he meant, but when he doesn't add context, that's how fans are going to hear it, understandably. And so it doesn't take any accountability. It comes across as very tone deaf, very head in the sand. And what he could say is like, look, I've built the roster. I need to take more accountability in putting the roster together. I should have given the coach a better roster to work with, things like that. So, but all he's saying is, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. It just comes across as defensive. That's one thing. The other thing I think is important to bring up is in the interview with the Tennessean, Barry Trotz brought up the freaking U2 story again. He brought it up. If you will recall, first year under Andrew Brunette, was when they had the infamous U2 concert trip canceled. And that was, and Barry Trotz took credit for that in the interview. He said, look, what happened? They weren't performing. And so I took away their U2 concert. And then they went on an 18-game point streak and, they got them to the playoffs. Yes, that is quite literally the sequence of events that happened there. That is factually correct. But it doesn't make sense to bring that up again now, because he's just saying, hey, remember that one time I got them to perform by humiliating them publicly? Like that story, that whole U2 thing was fun and we joke about it because the team won afterwards. They started winning afterwards. This is right now, they are not on the cusp of an 18-game point streak. They are not on the cusp of a 3-game point streak at this point. So can we stop?
Two-game point streak.
Truly. I mean, when your team is in the basement of the NHL for 2 seasons in a row now, it's not because you didn't let them go to a concert. That's not it. So stop bringing that up now. It's not the time.
I think tone deaf is an apt analysis and breakdown of what he's doing. And look, he's got the interview scheduled with 102.5 routinely. That's just part of the flagship Predators radio network. We had that with Laviolette. We had a standing interview with Sean Henry. We had David Poyle. We had all that stuff. And that's what it's supposed to be. But this other stuff is new. Like sitting down with Alex for a full long interview, doing the whole sit down with Greg. You have a goal. When you sit down, like media and subjects there's a two-way street. We want access to be able to tell the stories accurately and get to see inside and understand what's going on and analyze decision making and learn about people and tell interesting stories. And you can't really do that without some semblance of access. But while we're a necessary evil because we're the conduit to the fans for a lot of these players and coaches in every sport, they also know that they have opportunity. When the Titans went through when they fired Rand Carthon in December and January, don't tell me that you couldn't tell which media members were getting information from Rand Carthon and which media members were getting information from the organization. You have to understand that you have to consider the source on some of this. So my point is that Barry knows what he's doing when it comes to, I'm going to give Greg Wyshynski a long sit down. I'm going to give Alex a long sit down. I'm not saying they're in the bag for him. That's not what I'm saying. But he's got a strategy. And the problem is I can see that being correct. He just doesn't execute the strategy well. He doesn't do it the way you should do it, which is just fall on how long have we been asking for him to just come out? And I'm sure he has said it quickly because I've heard it myself in press conferences where he said like, hey, I didn't do a great job of this, or hey, I'm not saying he doesn't have that in him because I've heard him do it. The problem is he says so much stuff all the time and he meanders and kind of just like he doesn't do himself any favors with this style of communication, kind of like I am right now. And he could do it like if you just had a plan of messaging and executed the plan and do it with some humility. And it's just he had a plan to do all this, and it went the opposite direction. And the one line I want to ask you about with Saravelli, because I don't necessarily care about the details of his report necessarily, where he says, I think he said something like, and there's a lot of frustration with how things have been handled. That was an interesting line in there. And I don't know if it's a throwaway line and he didn't mean it specifically or not, but that's what I'd be curious about. What could that possibly mean? Is that Barry's messaging to the media? Is that not changing coaches? Is that how the coaches handle things? Is that how the front office is handling things? Is that how the players are handling things? Is that Marcia show in the offseason? I don't know.
I think it's deliberately vague because it's not a report. It is like Frank is seeing how fans are reacting. He's seeing just all of the noise around the team, and he's drawing these conclusions. They're reasonable conclusions to draw. A lot of fans are mad that the coach wasn't fired. A lot of fans are mad about how Barry Trotz is handling this. I mean, I think it makes total sense. But, again, Trotz talks a lot. He talks a lot. But he talks a lot without really saying much sometimes. And so he's frustrated. He's angry. He has every right to be. I get it. Like he's of course he's frustrated watching this team play the way that it does. But again, so much of the time it's what he doesn't say. It is the context that lacks. Like if he's talking about, well, I know how I watch because I'm a coach, so I know which guys are supposed to be in which places at which times. I think that is going to, I know how guys are supposed to play. So that's how I know it's not coaching, it's the players. It's like, okay, but on top of that, that's where you add, hey, if the team lacks defensive structure, maybe that's on me because of how I built the roster. Hey, this team still doesn't have a first line center. That's on me because I built the roster. This team has regressed 2 seasons in a row. That's on me. So instead of just saying it's not on Brunette, it's on the players. It's like, well, who brought the players there, Barry? Like it's a lot of what he doesn't say. Yeah. And so I think that, and again, look, there's nuance to all of this. Brunette has made some questionable choices. The team does kind of float between systems sometimes. The compete level is not there sometimes. All of that is true. But you can't make sweeping statements like that. You can't make defensive statements like that when you need to be, because again, it comes across, so much of a coach's job is to block out the external noise. You have to block it out. You have to be sort of insulated. You have to be in the zone, and you have to communicate with your players, and that's it. You can't let the outside noise get to you. That's how Barry Trotz is operating right now. He's trying to block out all that outside noise. And as a GM, you can't do that. I mean, you can, but it'll make you real bad at your job. So you need to have better communication with the fans. He is still so focused on his communication with the players, with the coaches, with everyone in the locker room.
He said it. He said it in the interview. I miss being in the locker room with the players every day. And I'm like, bro, you retired.
Yeah. And so now before anything starts with that, even though it already has started, people are saying, oh, sounds like he wants to get back behind the bench.
Oh, he ended that.
He doesn't.
He squashed it with Wyshynski for sure.
Yeah, he doesn't. But people are still going to talk. My
column last week was a little tongue in cheek, just for everybody to know.
Well, I know yours was, but I mean, other people are, saying, well, maybe, because honestly, it's low hanging fruit at this point. But I think that if you look at everything else that he's done, it makes sense. He is still he's prioritizing his communication and his relationships with the players and with the coach. And so he's saying, well, my relationships with those guys are good, so everything's good. Like, even if that's not what he was saying, that's how it comes across to the fans. And the fans don't want to hear that. They want accountability, and he has to start listening, and he has to start speaking to the fans, not just to the players.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Act like a general manager, not a head coach. You got to be more political. You got to be more nuanced. You're talking to your fans and your shareholders, not necessarily the players and the coaches all the time. It's okay to be subtle and have subtle messaging strategies for everybody, but you got to do it better than that. And I'm not even saying that I know how or that I do a good job of it. I'm just saying, like, I can tell that he's on damage. He's on a damage control tour right now, and it's getting worse. And that's a problem.
Every time he opens his mouth, it gets worse. And that's what I think is like, it's funny. I noticed, I feel like a lot of people appreciated it because or they appreciated it at first because so David Poyle, every time he spoke to the media, he always had notes with him. He always had paper, and he would usually have a prepared opening statement that he would read, and then he would answer questions, and he would always refer to the prepared notes that he had. So I think people liked at first that Barry Trotz would just come up and talk off the cuff, and it was refreshing. It was not scripted. It was, people liked it better. But now you're starting to see the other side of that coin, that's not always a good thing. Sometimes you need to have the notes. You need to have the talking points. You need, again, even if what you're saying isn't factually incorrect, you have to frame it a certain way. You have to give it context, because otherwise, again, you have to remember who your audience is. Your audience is not just the players. It's not the coaches. Your audience is the fan base.
Brandon, there's plenty of blame to go around. Couldn't agree more. Josh is saying, could that be coming from something else said off the record? I assume you're talking about the toxicity conversation. At least that's how the report sounds, but I don't know if that's true or not. Nate says, how about Sean Henry? He's been there since the early 2000s. He speaks for ownership publicly, so I'd think he'd fire GMs too, which I don't think he does. How far up does this go? Preds need to overhaul the entire front office. If you overhaul the entire front office, that does not include Sean Henry. So Sean Henry has very little to do with football operations, hockey operations. And
also so football operations.
Yeah, it really doesn't do anything with football operations. Although, go Packers, Sean. They beat the Giants over the weekend. So here's ultimately what this comes to, because there's a lot of chatter about the deadline in these last few reports in the last couple days. And if we are to believe Barry Trotz when he says, I'm not making a change, and we're to believe him when he says ownership has not pressured me to make a change, and that we believe him when he says, I still think Andrew Brunette's the right coach for the job, and it's not his fault, and he continues to blame the players, and in which he will not admit, I guess, is his own fault from roster construction standpoint. It still cannot continue like this without changes happening. And so we know the players that can be traded. We know that Ryan O'Reilly will be traded, probably. We know that Holla and Bunting and McCarron have expiring contracts. Justin Barron has an expiring contract, although I think he's an RFA. So, like, we know the obvious ones. But this latest round of reports with quotes from the veterans is very much acknowledging that they're going to have some conversations soon, not right now, apparently not yet, but that they are going to have tough conversations very soon. It was in the lead of Wyshynski's story, basically. The vultures are circling. I'm getting calls. The players know it's coming. It hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen. And we're going to have to talk to people and say, hey, would you be willing to waive this no movement clause in an effort to give yourself a chance to go somewhere else and have more success and maybe win another championship? And Stamkos and Marcia Show are top of the list for those names, and Ryan O'Reilly. If you're not going to change the coach and you're not going to change the general manager, you still have to change something, because this is unacceptable, what's happening. I think the fans deserve to say what they want to say about this, which is that this is unacceptable. So Ryan O'Reilly reports saying that it's a first and a prospect. I think it's the right move to start the conversations today around Ryan O'Reilly and put that asking price in the clouds. I am fine with that. I think that's the right strategy. If you get a taker, awesome, get rid of him. If you don't, you can trade him at the deadline for something that's close to what you're asking for. So I think, what do you make of the first round pick and a prospect?
I think that's a very high asking price for Ryan O'Reilly. And I mean, no disrespect to O'Reilly. I just think that when you're in a position that the Predators are in, which you just laid out, this is not a team that's on the cusp of anything. They are not like close to making it. They would need to be a lot closer to contending than they are for you to justify an asking price like that for Ryan O'Reilly. At this point, Ryan O'Reilly's absence from this team is not what's going to make or break the season. Like, it's just not. So you have to be realistic about it. Look at his age, look at his numbers right now. I know that this has been a down year, down couple of years for everybody, but I think that Barry Trotz needs to let go a little bit on that. I'm not saying give him away for pennies, but I'm saying I don't know.
But you have time. You have time to put the asking price right now. You could put the price pretty high.
Yeah.
Would you rather have a first round pick or a prospect? Would you rather have? I saw some folks in the Lower Broad Hockey comment section, the chat room, talking about some of the guys that were just picked, some of the guys that you passed on to take Brady Martins, the Jake O'Briens and the Martones and like those guys. Like I would love another one of those top 10 picks from last year over a first round pick. Like if you could get somebody like that, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, but I don't think anyone's giving you that for Ryan O'Reilly.
Like, well, I'm just saying, like, as a, you can sweeten the pot too. They could sweeten the pot. I'm just saying, like, the strategy of going to get a player like that, I think is, get the 8th overall pick or whatever, Roger McQueen or whatever. Like, what I'm saying? Like, go get somebody.
Yeah. But I don't think any of those guys are going to be available. But I hear what you're saying. I think that it I don't know. At this point, you need prospects who are going to try and who are actually going to impact your team in the near future. And I don't know. I think people are sick of the draft picks and that people just want to start seeing actual close to NHL ready talent. Because again, we have said this before that if you look at his, albeit very brief history, Barry Trotz appears to have drafted pretty well over the last couple of years. So maybe it would be a good thing to get him another draft pick, see what he can do with that. But I mean, that's like the one thing he can do. So
I think you take as many assets as you can get. Like at this point, you stockpile as many assets as you can get right now. Because if you are not changing the coach, you've got to sell the fans on we're buying into the rebuild a little bit more. And you don't have, and you and I have talked about this, the anatomy of a rebuild. A lot of times it's 4 to 6 years, maybe longer. Like you can kind of include some of the seasons we've already had if you want. They sold a bunch of pieces off 3 years ago when Trotz took over 3 seasons 2 years ago. They sold a bunch of, like, they did better obviously in his first year. Like they have the top 5 pick from last year. They had multiple first round picks in the drafts before that. Like they've done some of the things you would want a rebuilding franchise to already do through no like intentionality. So if you're the number 1 pick this year and you had a top 5 pick last year, you had 2 first rounders a couple years ago, and you had 2 first round pick. I think they had 2 first round picks. They weren't super high, but I know the Matthew Wood Molendijk one. But then I also think, wasn't it Svechkov and LaRue maybe?
And LaRue, yeah. Or was it Svechkov and LaRue or Kemmel and LaRue?
Maybe it was Kemmel and LaRue. The point is that they had 2 drafts with 2 first round picks. Then they had a top 5 pick, and then they might have another top 5. Like you can kind of see that they're further down the rebuild path than I think anyone kind of realizes. Maybe even Barry Trotz. And so if you supercharged it, which I think you have to do, that's all that you can do right now. You're last place. You're the worst offense in the NHL. You're a worse defense. You're worse on special teams. Your goaltender just got pulled again. And you like, what other option do you have if you're not changing the coach? And so you've got to get rid of all the pieces that you can move. And then you've got to convince some guys, hey, time. Do you want to go have a fun couple seasons and try to win a championship, or do you want to do this for the next couple years? And I guarantee you, Marshall Show, he might look at that income tax and be like, maybe I'll stay.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of those guys, too. I mean, a lot, all 2 of them, Marchessault and Stamkos. I think, I've talked to people who've covered Stamkos in Tampa, too. And like people who've covered him for a long time, they know Stamkos, if he's not going back to Tampa, he's not going anywhere else. He's not moving his family again. That's just not what he's going to do, from a lot of people that I've spoken to who covered him for a long time in Tampa. So I do agree with you that I think this team is a little further down the rebuild path than a lot of people think they are. It's sort of like a quiet under the radar rebuild, even if Barry Trotz doesn't want to call it that. He does. Quiet rebuild.
Quiet quitting. Is that what this is?
But he doesn't want to call it that, whatever. Like, I think his refusal to call it a rebuild comes back to he is more concerned with what his players think of him and how he comes across to his players. Because listen, it doesn't sound great if you are the guy who brought Stamkos and Marchessault in with the promise that, hey, we're going to try to win here. Now, for you to then turn around and say, actually, we're just going to rebuild, that doesn't look good. It doesn't sound good to your players. So he is more concerned with trying to sound good to the players. Although the players, let's give them some credit here. They're not stupid. They know what's happening. They can see it. Right. And so I think it's a lot about the messaging. That's the problem here.
It's so funny because I think about like a few different examples in Nashville around this topic, right? The David Poile conversation around the competitive rebuild, infamous phraseology there that he used to describe what they were trying to do, rebuilding on the fly, whatever you want to call it. That's certainly a hockey. There is some of that you have to acknowledge. Like, they have some PTSD inside the building about using the phrase, and that's some of that comes from the fact that David Poile's still walking around in there. It feels like there's scar tissue still inside the building, is what it feels like. It feels like there's scar tissue. If you look at the Titans, for example, Rand Carthon took over as the general manager after John Robinson was fired, and Rand Carthon stepped to the podium in the middle of an offseason and said, we answered every question. He went through free agency and he stepped to the podium and he said, we filled every hole. And what he did is he elevated expectations. And that was his strategy, messaging, etc. His strategy was saying, hey, we did everything we could. We spent all this money. We got this player, this player, this player. We drafted these guys. We're good to go. We're ready to go compete. And fans said, okay, sounds good. Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi this offseason used the word rebuild reluctantly, but they did it. And every step of the way, they lowered expectations. Now, it doesn't mean that they still didn't have to fire their coach. They had to fire Brian Callahan 6 games into the season. But they were being very honest with everybody from the word go. I was at the combine around both of them, talking to both of them about how they don't like to use the word rebuild, but we got to be honest about where this roster is. Like, that's two very different strategies that resulted in two very different reactions from the fan base around the same exact situation for the Tennessee Titans. I don't know why they don't do that here. Trotz, nobody wants to admit it, but you got to face reality here.
Yeah, because, before, and I've said this before, you were in a situation where you had, you're Barry Trotz, you come to a fork in the road. You can either commit to the rebuild 3 years ago, or you go for it. You try to win. He picked the latter. It didn't work. And so now he doesn't have the option anymore. The rebuild is here. The rebuild is now, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. But the longer you go without acknowledging it and without facing that reality, at least publicly, again, I want to give Barry Trotz a little more credit to think that he's not blind. He sees what's happening too. But the longer you go without publicly acknowledging and facing this reality, the more the fan reaction, the fan expectations, they're just going to get sour, because you're in this position where you raise those expectations and it didn't work. But you forgot to admit to the fans, hey, so that didn't work. That's on me. And now we move forward. He skipped that part. So it comes across, even if this is what he doesn't mean, it comes across as very like, nope, my head's still in the clouds and everything's great and everything's fine. And just, give it 6 or 7 more games and it'll be fine. So I'm not doing the hand thing. I'm not doing it.
No. Trotz can say what this is ultimately what you're saying here too. P Houston 87 says Trotz can think what he wants, finishing bottom 5 2 years in a row. That's rebuilding. That is. And some of it, look, they are. He is stubborn. He has an ego like all of these people do, like all of us do. And the stubbornness with which that's made Barry Trotz, I think, a really good coach. I think it's hurting him right here. I just think it's hurting him. So, look, they play. Here's the thing. We're not going to talk too much about the Detroit match, the Detroit game on Wednesday. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Hope everybody's great out there. Go, of course, to Sinkers Beverages for all your beverage needs this weekend. They'll play Chicago on Friday night on the road. You get cooked by your arch rival in the division who is going through the exact process quicker than you have. That's not going to go over well. Winnipeg at home, division rival. They've been able, since the turning and the changing of the guard in that playoff series 10 years ago almost, they've been consistently at the top of the division where Nashville used to be and is no longer. And Calgary on Tuesday. So what you're getting all three different ways to go about looking at franchises and comparing yourselves, because Calgary is the worst team in the league, not named Nashville. You are looking at the things you could have done in a rebuild, the things you could have been, hopefully, as a winning franchise. And now on Tuesday, you're at home against Calgary, the team that the rebuild people want you to lose to. And that, I'm not saying that's normal. Like we're having this argument with Titans fans right now. Like they want the first pick, and it's like, yeah, but Cam Ward winning would be really valuable to Cam Ward, just so you guys know. And I'm not saying that you can't have your own opinion about which one you think is more valuable, but don't say there's not value in young players learning how to win. There is. But there also is value in having a better pick. So like I see both sides of it. But the rebuild fans wanted you to lose to Calgary. They want you to lose to Chicago, and they want you to lose to Winnipeg. And I don't know if you got to start making changes at some point. If we get together next week, Emma, on this show on a Wednesday, and they've lost 4 more times, I wouldn't be surprised if they did. They'll probably win once, but like I wouldn't be surprised if they lose 4 straight.
But also, I think the thing that I keep coming back to is, when now I can't even remember, and you laid it out so beautifully, but now it all kind of runs together. Whenever Barry Trotz said, I think I'm not firing the coach, but the next 7 or 8 games will tell us what we need to.
He said that on this Monday to Wyshynski. It ran yesterday on ESPN.
Okay. So when he said that, I'm like, what more can the next 7 games tell you? Like, this isn't new. This has been going on since last year. I don't know what's going to change between now and next week, or now and 2 weeks, that could drastically change your thinking on this whole thing, which actually is a problem. If something happens in the next week that dramatically changes your thinking on the future of this franchise, then that's a bigger problem. Don't let another 18-game point streak, but in this case, like a 2-game point streak, don't let that happen. It can't sway you from the plan, because right now there's one plan. It has to be one plan. I mean, you're in a position now. You can't keep running it back with 0 changes. You're a former coach. You keep looking at, well, the coaching's great. I think the players are the problem. And there we go. And I know that's not exactly what he's saying, but that's how it comes across. You have to acknowledge, hey, this is not working. It's not good. We need to make a change. We need to make a change. If you're not going to change the coach, fine, but then you need to start selling some players. You need to start doing something here, something to acknowledge that this is not working, and it hasn't been working since last year. Yeah. And that's when, like you said, it wouldn't surprise me if they lost 4.
So let me ask you about this quote. He said this was on Monday before the Florida game. He says, quote, "If you watch some of our games, the players haven't quit. They play hard and they practice hard," Trotz said. "When the players have quit on the coach, they don't practice hard. They don't pay attention. There's no energy. I can't say that." Now, that was the day the Tennessean report came out, when it appeared that he was blasting the players on the Friday conversation. That night, do you believe you saw those comments come true? Like, do you think that you believe him in the Florida game?
I mean, it's hard, because I look back at like the first game in Sweden. to see how they were down. They hadn't scored all game. They fight back. They score to tie it, and then they go win in overtime. That's a team that hasn't given up. That's a team that hasn't tuned out the coach. Like you can see it. You see fights. You see flashes of fight. You see it in the Colorado game. They played their butts off, even though they just weren't getting. They were getting chances. They were creating chances, but they weren't getting the results. The Florida game was bad. The Florida game, I will say, no, I didn't see that. But that was one game. And I know it's convenient and it works to just point to that one game because that's the one game that happened after he said that and be like, well, clearly he's wrong. But again, I've talked to players. I mean, I talked to Steven Stamkos for a long time last year about this while they were struggling. I mean, when weren't they? But just kind of one of those things, because last year it was so much of the talk was about the system, Andrew Brunette's system. It's hard to pick up, blah, blah, blah. And so I asked Stamkos about this and I was like, okay, explain to me like I'm 5, like what makes this system so difficult? And he cut me off. He interrupted me and he was like, it's not difficult. It is not difficult to understand. And it's not like other teams aren't doing it. It's just different. It's something that when you have been in a different organization, in his case, one organization for 17 years that does something a certain way, you have to do a lot of unlearning. And that's the challenging part. It's not that any of this is difficult to comprehend, difficult to grasp, difficult to play, but it's just, you have to do a lot of unlearning. And so again, I come back to, this whole time have been saying this is not all on the coach. Does the coach share some of the blame? Sure.
Yeah.
Do the players? Sure. Does the GM? Oh yeah. But you have to acknowledge that. And as we've just spent the last 45 minutes pointing out, just with everything that's happened since November 6th, so much of it comes back to messaging. It's about messaging from Barry Trotz. He really needs a PR coach. Like he needs to take it. And if he has one, then he's not listening. Because a lot of this could have been controlled or at least contained with better messaging, better expectation setting for the fan base. Because now you've allowed this whole narrative to get out of hand. And every time Barry Trotz opens his mouth, he sticks his foot in it. And so it's just, he's not doing himself any favors here.
Yep. I think that's a good place to end it here, Emma. I think you got it right. I think you have nailed it. Go check out her article, of course. You can get to her at Emma_Lingan. That's where the article's at and when it's been posted. So make sure you go check it out. Thanks to all of you guys in the comments. I think at some point there are changes coming. What are they? When are they? What do they look like? We'll evaluate them as they come, but it has to happen at some point. So you cannot continue to do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again and expect a different result. That is the definition of insanity. So Sinkers Beverages, you can continue to use them over and over and over again because they deliver every single time. Sinkers Beverages, literally and figuratively. If you go in there, they'll help with all your needs for the holiday season. If you deliver, they'll literally do that for you. So search Uber Eats and have them deliver the booze directly to your house over the weekend. Search Sinkers Beverages. So there you go. All right. Anything else? Any other? Are you excited about Thanksgiving? Have a great Thanksgiving, Emma.
Thank you. I'm excited. Yeah.
I love Thanksgiving. It's my favorite weekend of the year. It's last weekend of college football. You got rivalries, you got NFL, you got food, family, and football, and libations and festivities all day, every day for the next few days. I got a lot of nieces and nephews in town. I can't wait to go squeeze on them a little bit. And otherwise, everybody take a deep breath. I don't know what the next chapter of this timeline is going to be, but I have a feeling it'll. Yes, Josh says Kiffin to the Preds. Guys, I'm just saying this on a Predators podcast. A little Easter egg for all you Nashville sports fans. I don't think it's crazy to think that Kiffin could be a professional coach in the city of Nashville. Just want to throw that out there. Go listen to SEC Football Live. For Emma and Braden, thank you for hanging out. Thank you for listening. Please, everybody, have a great and wonderful Thanksgiving. For a couple of moments, just forget about how bad Nashville sports are and just be thankful and grateful for the people in your lives and the time you spend with them, because it all goes away sometime. So just everybody enjoy it. Be grateful, be thankful, and thank you guys all for listening and spending time with us. We do appreciate you guys. For everybody out there, for Emma and Braden, thanks for listening. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.